Hello and welcome to the Uri Gedalia. My name is Uri Gedalia in Hebrew. My American name is Ronald J. Abrams. My stage name when I'm a comedian, I'm Ronald J. Pickles. But right now, I'm putting on my scholarly hat, and I'm going to discuss the issue, the debate between Darwinism, which 95%, maybe even 99% of all scientists nowadays accept Darwinism at face value, that not only do they consider it a theory, but they consider it a fact, and it's really never been proven. It's very difficult to prove. There is not enough evidence to even come close to proving Darwinism. And nevertheless, 99% of scientists believe in it. Now, there's two aspects of Darwinism that I wish to discuss with you. There's the origin of species, which means that all life on Earth came from a first living cell. We'll discuss where that first living cell came from. There had to be first living cells because Dr. Stephen Hawking, the great genius of our time, may he rest in peace, the great Stephen Hawking, he said that for the first living cells to develop on Earth from Earth itself, the probability of that is like 0.000 with like a billion zeros and then a one. The probability of non-bio matter developing into, transforming into biomatter, a biocell, a biological living cell. It's not possible that if there was a time in the history of planet Earth when there was not one living cell here in the planet, on the planet, in the planet, then where did that first living cell come from? That's the question that he was asked. And he said, well, it could not come from Earth itself. It had to come from outer space. We're going to get to that. Just put that now, just think that. Put that on the back burner. Now let's discuss origin of species. Origin of species says that if you asked a Darwinist, where did human beings come from? Well, we came from some prehistoric ape creatures. They used to call them Neanderthal man. Now, of course, they always come up with new nomenclatures and terminologies. I think now they call them humanoids. And they claim they have evidence to that, but they have no evidence to that. Now, I've never seen any evidence that's verifiable. And I've researched it since I was 8 years old. I've never seen any research that's verifiable that you can point to this and say, well, there's the missing link. They're always looking for the missing link. But there is no way to verify that human beings are descended from ancient prehistoric ape creatures and that we evolved. There's no evidence of that. So according to evolutionists, Darwinists, where did human beings come from? We evolved from these prehistoric ape creatures. Where did they come from? They evolved from other forms, other different animals. They evolved. Where did the animals come from? The first animals were like fish-type creatures that developed legs, and they came up on land. And they claimed that they found a skeleton of a fish with legs, and therefore that's proof that their theory is true. It's not proof that their theory is true just because they found a skeleton of a fish with legs. It could have been a phenomenon, who knows what it was. But one skeleton, one fossilized skeleton, a fish skeleton with legs is no proof that man originated from the primordial soup, as they used to call it. Of course, I studied evolutionism in the 60s and the 70s, and of course I've researched it since then, and they come up with new nomenclatures for the same old ideas and theories. The point that I'm making here is first going to make a l'chaim because I'm here in Israel. I am Philly boy in Israel, as I said, and now I put on my scholarly cap to discuss how is it possible to reconcile the narrative of the Hebrew Bible, where God created all of the universe in 6 days and rested on the seventh. We're going to discuss that. Because a lot of people are under the misconception. A lot of people are misinformed, where they think that according to biblicists, people who believe in the Hebrew Bible, they miscalculate our opinion on that. Our opinion is not that the universe is 6,000 years old. The Hebrew calendar, it is now 5,782 years since the creation of the first man. Now, this is very important. Our calendar does not count from the beginning of time. Our calendar counts from the end of the 6th day of creation, when God created the first man. Now, this is a very important point to know it, and you must understand it well. Once again, a lot of scientists, scholars who ask these questions, who discuss these questions, who debate these issues, they are under a misconception. It's a misnomer to believe that according to people who believe in the Bible, that we believe that the universe is 5,782 or so. They call it 6,000 years. That's not true. And the reason why that's not true, in fact, according to the first 3 days of creation, there was no sun, moon, and stars. So when it says there was evening, there was morning, day one, on the first day, there was no sun, moon, and stars. So it definitely was not a 24-hour period, because 24-hour day cycles only happens when there's a sun and an earth, and the earth is rotating and the sun is rising in the east and setting in the west. And that's how we measure a day. So you cannot say that the first 3 days were 24-hour days, because once again, there was no sun, moon, and star until the 4th day of creation, when God created the sun, moon, and stars. There was this earth, right? The first day, Bereshit bara Elohim es hashamayim ve'ha'aretz v'ha'aretz ha'isasoi v'bayu v'choshech ha'v'nesoi v'ruach Elohim melech panei hamayim v'yomer Elohim yehi or, and God said, let there be light. Right? So it just says in the beginning of God's creating of the heavens and the earth. In the beginning of God creating the heavens and the earth, there was earth. There was earth before there was sun, moon, and stars. The earth was the first thing. There was earth and heavens. That means there was the physical earth, and there was the spiritual heavens. And then it says the darkness was upon the face of the deep. What does it mean that the darkness was on the face of the deep? There was darkness. You see, there was cheshek, there was darkness. Dark energy existed. It's the first thing that God created was dark energy. So this is according to the biblical narrative that I'm explaining. There wasn't any sun, stars, and moon. There was no sun, moon, and stars until the 4th day of creation. And therefore, there's no way that we could possibly know how much time elapsed from the beginning of the first day to the end of the 3rd day, which could be as long as you would like it to be. We have not a clue. Could be trillions of years. We don't, a trillion to the trillionth power. We don't know how long the first 3 days of creation, in terms of time, how we measure time. We measure time by the sunrise and sunset. We measure time 24-hour days. Each day is 24 hours, and this is a man-imposed time. It's an artificial time. Anything which man creates is artificial. That's the definition of artificial. Artificial definition of the word artificial is man-made. So there's 2 types of time. There's artificial time, and that's the time that man keeps by the atomic clock somewhere in the world, where there's this atomic clock that the whole world keeps its time by. So that's what I call artificial time. That's man imposes his measurement as time goes by. We measure the time, the movement of time. And it's constantly moving very quickly. 1 second can be divided into a millisecond, and it can be divided into a picosecond and a tacosecond. No, I'm talking about taco, I'm just joking with you. But it can be divided up into a trillionth. A picosecond is a trillionth of a second. A nanosecond is a billionth of a second. A millisecond is a millionth of a second. So time itself is moving so quickly. Imagine having a digital clock that measures trillionth of seconds. You can't have such a thing. You cannot see the numbers as they pass by that fast. Even if you measure Even if you have a digital clock, do you ever see those digital clocks that you have the seconds and then you have 30 parts of a second? Do you ever see how fast that side of the 30 every second goes? You can't see the numbers, it just flashes by. So imagine if there was counting a trillion seconds for a trillion of a second, a trillion times, trillion parts of a second. As each second goes by, it's just, in other words, the speed of time is so fast, it's really infinite. Time itself is infinite because you cannot measure it, because since you can divide up 1 second in time ad infinitum. Since you can divide a 1 second of time into a picosecond, which is a trillionth of a second, you can divide each trillionth of a second into another picosecond, a picosecond of a picosecond of a picosecond, and therefore time itself is infinite, and so too is space. Because you can take 1 meter and divide it into a picometer ad infinitum. Space itself is also infinite at its core. Scientists don't want to acknowledge that. It just seems that way. The same thing that what they used to say when I was in university about free will. We'll discuss that maybe in another session, where I had at least 3 professors when I was in Temple University who were teaching that free will is an illusion. They called it predeterminism, and that there's no such thing as free will. You just think you have free will, but it's only an illusion. Really, everything is pre-programmed, and they were teaching that. They evidently were given the orders to teach us, these leftist professors, these Marxist professors, and they didn't teach us Marxism. See, nowadays they teach Marxism openly. Karl Marx was like the biggest genius ever. He was also Jewish, by the way, as far as I know. And so to Sigmund Freud. Was Sigmund Freud Jewish? I don't remember. But Abraham Maslow was Jewish. I liked Abraham Maslow because he taught of self-actualization, where just those 2 words alone, self-actualization. Those 2 words, you can just write a book. What does it mean to self-actualize? Every person can come up with his own ideas of what it means to self-actualize. We know that there is the subconscious, which most people are not aware of what's going on in their own subconscious. And that's why they go to psychologists and psychiatrists and they go to therapists, because they really don't know what's going on with it. They go to psychics. People go to psychics because they don't know what's in their own subconscious. But I can teach you because I know how to tap into your own subconscious, but that's not for now. If you want to tap into your own subconscious, I can teach you how to do it. It's just a way of listening to your inner voice, listening to your gut feeling, looking for signs, because everybody has angels. Everybody has guardian angels. And most people are not even aware of their own guardian angels, and it's because they don't know how to get in touch with their subconscious, you see. Your guardian angels speak to you in an inner voice that talks inside your head in your subconscious, but if sometimes you get a flash, and you say, whoa, what was that? It's your guardian angel trying to get through to you. But anyway, we're not going into that now. Let's make it l'chaim. To life, l'chaim. You hear the song in the background? I hope it's not disturbing the video. This is a song called Celluloid Heroes. I once learned how to play it on my guitar a little bit. I might do it for you in a few minutes after we get bored of this discussion. But the point that I'm making is Darwinism versus the biblical narrative of creation. They call it creationism. Darwinism versus creationism. And I'm saying that it's irreconcilable. There's 2 aspects of Darwinism, don't forget. I didn't get into the second aspect yet. We only discussed origin of species and how it's irreconcilable with the biblical narrative, the creationist narrative, that man was created out of the earth. God basically took the earth and molded it and then shaped it into a human being. And then, he imbibed it. He imbibed in this man the spirit of life called the soul, the neshama, the divine soul. That means man is an animal, just like all the other animals. However, man is different than all the other animals because only man has a divine soul, which is like an angel. Now, there are other animals which also have divine souls. All creatures have consciousness. And every creature, there is the eagle, there is the ox, there is the lion, there is the wolf, the ox, the lion, the eagle, and the wolf. Benjamin is the wolf. Benjamin is likened to the wolf. And whatever. I'm not going into who my spirit guides are, but one of my spirit guides is the white wolf, also the German shepherd, and the Siberian husky. Whoever's watching this far, you might as well know that. I have a lot of spirit guides, and those are three of them. Now, so the point that I'm making here is let's focus on the original point, and that is that Origin of Species of Darwin is irreconcilable with the creationist biblical narrative of Genesis. Irreconcilable. And it's very simple. You don't even have to discuss it. In 2 seconds, I can tell you why it's irreconcilable. Just ask the question, where do human beings come from? According to the biblical narrative, the first human being was created at the end of everything that God created, all life on earth, trees, plants, fish, birds, all the animals, giraffes and cows and donkeys and and the llamas and the armadillos, and all of the animals, all the snakes and all the bugs and all the ants and all the maggots, all life on planet Earth was created the first from the fifth and sixth days of creation. All of life on Earth, fifth and sixth days of creation. There were angels already in existence from the second day of creation, according to our oral tradition that our ancient mystic scholars taught us. And that's been passed on throughout the generations, from rabbi to student, throughout the generations, our oral teachings. So, once again, Origin of Species of Darwin is irreconcilable with the biblical narrative of Genesis. Now, there is another aspect of Darwinism called natural adaptation, which basically means, and now there's different ways of explaining and understanding. I never read all of the books of Darwin. When I did research in college back in the late 70s and when I was in Temple University, I read a little bit of Origin of Species and Natural Adaptation. I read a lot of it, and I got the gist of the idea. So I cannot quote chapter and verse from his books, but I do recall that natural adaptation means that each individual species has to adapt to its environment in order to survive. But in order to do that, for example, I love the case of penguins, which is the case in point par excellence, penguins. Because penguins are birds that do not fly. They transformed their wings into flippers because they lived in such cold climates, in frozen ice climates, that they needed to put on blubber to insulate their inner organs to keep them warm so they don't freeze to death. And because they had to develop blubber, so they became heavy and could not fly, and they found it conducive that their wings were able to be used as flippers to swim. They're probably of the best swimmers in the world. Penguins are great swimmers. They swim sort of like dolphins. They come up because they have to come up for air. They can't stay under the water too long because they have to breathe. They need oxygen from the air. They don't have gills like fish, dolphins as well, and orcas and all of the whales. They need to, so they cannot stay underwater for too long without coming up to breathe air. And it's a miracle how, let's say dolphins, for example, how their blowhole, when they come out of the water, automatically blows out the CO2, and it automatically takes in the oxygen, and as it submerges again into the water, the hole automatically closes. It's unbelievable. And it never misses. I mean, they as far as I know, I've never seen a dolphin or a whale, go underwater without closing its hole and then getting water into its lungs. I don't think that ever happens, because at least a healthy whale or a healthy dolphin, I imagine once they get sick and they lose control of that hole closing and opening automatically, but I'm saying like 99.9% of all dolphins and whales, that it's embedded in its programming. The great programmer. I like to refer to God as a great programmer. He is the owner operator of the universe, and he is the great programmer who programs every living form, all of the cosmos. He programmed For example, the sun, when the moon passes between the sun and the earth, and we have a solar eclipse, and the moon just seems to be the perfect size to block out the sun. Is almost as if, it's the same size, and we know that the moon is tiny in comparison to the size of the sun. And nevertheless, it happens to be at the right distance between the earth and the sun, that when the moon passes in between and blocks out the sun, it appears to be the same size. Now that is precision. That means somebody put it like that. It just didn't happen as an act of cosmic evolution. And there's many examples, which I'm not going into now. I want to keep it as short as possible, because if you make a video too long, people say, well, it's too long, and then they don't even want to start it, because that's the way I am. I assume a lot of people are also like that. And therefore, I want to end it soon, and I'm going to make a l'chaim and wish you well. And the point that I'm making is, we're going to discuss in the next session that natural adaptation, and I just gave the example of the penguins. Natural adaptation is, yes, indeed, reconcilable with the biblical narrative of Genesis, of creation. And that's because we find in the teachings of the Talmud, of which were written 2,000 years ago, the oral teachings of the great mystics. All the rabbis in the Talmud were mystics. Once again, most people don't know this either. Our sages passed on to us a tradition, oral teaching, that all of the rabbis mentioned in the Talmud had the ability to raise the dead, to give life to a dead cadaver. All cadavers are dead. I guess that's a rule. You can say there's no exceptions to them. All cadavers are dead, because by definition, a cadaver is a dead body. Usually a dead human body. I don't know if they use the word cadavers for dead animals, but that's besides the point. Let's make it a chaim. And therefore, since natural adaptation is, yes, reconcilable with the biblical narrative, so people have to understand this, and I'm sharing my wisdom with people, that you should know that this is truth. And I don't think, if you want to debate me on this, I'll welcome you to debate me on this, but natural adaptation is said in the Talmud, and it's true. Even before I read it in the Talmud, I saw that it was true. I noticed penguins. They're the ones that are most blatantly. That's the biggest proof to natural adaptation. And all species, because of they're programmed to survive, so they adapt to their environment. For example, Jews in the Holocaust. They adapted in order to survive. So they lived off what scraps of food they can dig out of the garbage, and they came to realize that potato peels actually can sustain they can give you a lot of vitamins that you need if you just get used to eating potato peels. So it's not about your cup being half empty or half full, you say. It's what you do is if your cup is half full and half empty, you bring a smaller cup and you transfer, not transmit. You don't transmit liquid unless you're on Star Trek and you want to beam up some liquid. Let's say you want to beam down a bottle of Jack Daniels from the Starship Enterprise to Captain Kirk, who met a nice chick on the planet. Anyway, I'm joking. So you can transmit liquid. Maybe we'll get to that technology eventually in another 100 years or so. It's always good to give 100 years for some kind of, when will they come up with a technology? Because when will they come up with a technology where you can transmit smell, right? We have audio and video transmission, but we don't have feel. You can't feel me. You cannot taste me, even if you wanted to. And you cannot smell me. So I can smell really bad right now, and it's not going to affect you. And that's why people who don't like smokers, I can smoke and the smoke's not going to get in your face. Some people say, oh, I can't see him smoking. Oh, my God. Anyway, that's why I like Katie Rivers, because she had a picture of herself with a cigarette dangling from her mouth in a restaurant, dangling from her lips. Lovely girl. And she's brilliant, and I follow her posts. And I want to say a shout out to Katie Rivers. Besides Katie Rivers, I want to give a shout. I see. Look, I think that Katie Rivers is. I have to transmit the legacy of the Jewish people to the new generation of Jews, and I always look for brilliant young people who are open to listening to truth. And that's why I reached out to Katie Rivers, and I'm glad that she commented on my last video. I hope she comments on this one as well. So here's a shout out to you, Katie Rivers, and keep on doing what you're doing. I really wish you a lot of success in your career, whatever you choose to be. And I see a lot of people follow you on Facebook, and that's great because you're brilliant and you're gorgeous and young and you just have everything going for you. And I know you're going to make it big in this world someday, and that's why I would like to guide you in terms of Torah wisdom, because I know you're very proud to be Jewish. And you too, Sindel. How you doing, Sindel? Whoever's watching, Tanya Johnson, all my friends who watch my videos, and Stuart Josephs, and I don't want to mention everybody because then there's always going to be somebody I leave out. So if you're a person who watches my videos, you should know I love you, because only people I love would ever watch my videos. So live long and prosper, Captain.